Dream Theater by Dream Theater. Alright, so Dream Theater finally have a new album out. I believe this is their 12th studio album. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is their first album in which Mike Mangini is to take part in the songwriting process. Of course, he was on the last album, Dramatic Turn of Events, but the drum parts were already like written for him, so he had to go along with those. Here, he provides his own spin on things. Of course, this review isn't going to be like focused on Mike Mangini or anything, and just because I mentioned him first doesn't mean that it's going to be all on him. I mean, he was already on the album before this, so his presence in the band isn't exactly completely new by this point, but here, again, he shows off more of his own style, which is actually really cool. It reminds me of Neil Peart a lot of the time, just his technical stylings, just the way he plays, and even the tone of the drum sounds very Neil Peart-esque, if you know what I mean. So it's actually really cool. In fact, there's a lot of moments on this album that remind me of Rush, like the intros to The Looking Glass and Surrender to Reason. They definitely have a very Rush-esque feel to them. The Looking Glass, sorry, kind of reminds me of like a Limelight. Like the intro to that song definitely has a very Limelight-esque feel to it, but it's not exactly like ripping it off or anything. I think it's mostly just using it as like a basic guide or whatever. I think Surrender to Reason has it's kind of, to me, it just kind of feels like Limelight and Tom Sawyer fused together or something like that. That's just what I get out of this, but there's definitely a lot of moving pictures influence on this album, and in fact, there's a lot of like older influence on this album, like period. What I mean by that is that there's just a lot of influence from like all over their career. It's basically like a rundown of the certain stuff that they've done in their career, pretty much. You notice little things here and there that they've done in the past, whether it be like a more tranquil keyboard section like you may have heard off of Images and Words to something a bit more technical and complex and crazy, like something you would hear off their 2000s albums like Systematic Chaos and Octavarium, stuff like that. Which makes sense because this is actually their first self-titled album. Usually when a band does a self-titled effort, it's usually like very early in the career, like, oh hey everybody, we're Iron Maiden and we're ready to take on the world. Or it's very late in the career, like, oh hey everybody, we're this one band, we've accomplished a lot, and now we're just going to show you what we're all about, which Dream Theater is essentially doing here. Or maybe it's a band like Queensryche, like they had their self-titled effort earlier this year with Todd La Torre, and basically telling everybody, oh hey guys, we're Queensryche still, we just told Jeff Tate to get the fuck out of here, so we just want to make it up to you guys once again, make sure that we're on even terms again. Or kind of ironic that they actually their first release was called Queensryche, and now they have another one. Which I mean, the first one was an EP, that was an album. But I'm sidetracking. You get my point. Just very early, very late. I think the only exception I could think of is Metallica with the Black Album, very like middle of the road, which you don't often see. And also, the influences spread to like other artists. Like I said, Rush is very prevalent on this album. I've heard a bit of Queen here and there, Queensryche, like I said, and like during the, I guess during the song "Surrender to Reason," there were actually some choir keys here and there, which kind of reminded me of. Actually, they very much reminded me of Ozzy Osbourne's song "Diary of a Madman." So I thought that was a nice touch there. And because they have all these diverse influences and stuff, I think this may be one of their most diverse albums overall. I mean, Dream Theater has always been a very diverse band, let's be honest here, but I think because they have all these various influences from like earlier on in their career, this is definitely like a very diverse album, like probably even by their standards. And that's part of the reason why I really like this album because they actually take a lot of influences from the stuff that I liked most from Dream Theater, like their earlier stuff, Images and Words, Awake, Change of Seasons, stuff like that. There's a bit more of a cohesiveness to this album as opposed to a lot of Dream Theater's most recent work, which I couldn't really care less for. But I don't know, I just felt like touching base with this one because I guess there's something about the fact that they were doing like basically a portfolio of what they've been doing throughout their entire career, and that would include stuff like Images and Words, Awake, and their earliest material and stuff like that. And the songlights themselves are actually a bit more cohesive. And there's definitely a lot less wankering and stuff like that. And whenever there is some very technical passages, I think they do it like very like tastefully. It's not being overdone or anything like that, which I feel they tend to do too much of the time. But here, I think they definitely make it a lot more just workable. They make it a lot more palpable to these years, at least. I'm sure a lot of you guys love their other discography. I've been trying to get into the rest of their discography, but really the 90s stuff for me is really where it's at. And I'm glad they were able to take that influence and put it all throughout this album. There's some moments here and there where I'm reminded of songs like Surrounded and The Mirror and stuff like that. One of the songs on here, which is called The Enigma Machine, and it actually could fit pretty well on an album like Awake and stuff like that. It's got some organs in the background. It's one of the more technical songs in the album. It's an instrumental piece, and it reminds me of Erotomania, The Mirror, and stuff like that. I think it could fit really well on that album if they'd made that album, or if they made that song during the Awake album sessions almost 20 years ago. There's just definitely a lot of stuff that I really like about this album because they're picking up influences from their earlier affairs. And the last song of the album, the 22-minute epic Illumination Theory, I think is a pretty cool epic. I don't think it's necessarily like their best epic that they've ever done. I think songs like Learning to Live and Change of Seasons are better, but I think this is definitely a very cool, like, big song, so to speak. It's the only song on the album that goes over 20 or 10 minutes, but I mean, hey, it goes over 20 minutes, so twice that. I think it's definitely got a nice groovy feel at first. I think there's some jungle beats that go off like during the first section of the song. Then it goes into like this very beautiful like Yes Porcupine Tree sort of ambient section like right afterwards, and then after that it goes into like this really like almost operatic orchestrated orchestra section, which I think they managed to fit in really nicely. And this song overall is definitely definitely a real winner. I think this could be probably one of their better epics with repeated listens because admittedly I've only listened to this album once all the way through. I'm just talking about my general thoughts about the album, which it just may seem like incoherent rambling to you guys, but basically just going off the top of my head. I guess I don't really have a lot to say. Dream Theater, like the musicians themselves, you know, they've always been technically superb and stuff. You can't really talk about that unless you just want to say the same thing over and over. Everybody's in tip-top shape. Like, as always, Mike Mangini fits right in. And James LeBray, he sounds very, very good on this album. I think he's definitely made a really good recovery, which it's definitely really good. He has some really like strong notes and stuff all throughout this album. I can't really say anything else without saying the same thing over and over. So yeah, I'll just say that this is a really strong album by this most technically proficient band as always. I think they've really refined their sound quite a bit, like taken out the junk and just left us with the goodies. I think The Looking Glass is definitely a favorite of mine. With repeated listens, it could potentially be a Best Song of 2013 winner. Who knows? Same with Illumination Theory. It definitely has a shot up there, so we'll just have to wait and see. Anyway, I don't think I could go on without saying the same thing twice, or more than that. But anyway, I'm probably gonna give this an 8.5 out of 10. Very solid, very good album by Dream Theater. Not quite up to the standards of Images and Words, but hey, how can you possibly top that masterpiece? Anyway, I'm done here. Thank you very much for watching. See ya.